Welcome to the Writer's Den. My name is Jane Waters Thomas, and today we have a wonderful writer and author with us, Rodney Wetzel. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, Rodney, we're going to talk about a very different style of writing today, as you are a fictional writer for horror. And we're going to talk about your new book, Fritz, and some of the cool characters that are in it. What kind of inspired you to begin writing?
Well, when I was young, I did a lot of reading. And at about 14, my sister gave me a book and said, "Here, read this." And it was a new author. His name was Stephen King, and the book was Salem's Lot. And from that time on, I was in love. I loved horror. I loved the fact that it scared me to death. I had nightmares, and but I just fell alive, and I fell in love with the horror.
You know, I remember watching an interview with Stephen King one time, and he said, "I don't look under my bed."
Right.
Do you find that in your house also?
Not really. There's times when I'm writing the book that I have to stop, walk away for a while, because people read it once, but when you're writing a book, you have to play it over and over in your mind. And sometimes it kind of freaks you out a little bit, so you have to take that break.
Gotcha, gotcha. Well, you know, in reading some of your information about just your history and your bio, your actual degree is in education, and then you went into rehab and working with the disabled. How has some of that influenced you as an author?
Life experiences. I was truly blessed to work with the disabled population. It's really a gift that you get in return. And it kind of taught me, I had a traumatic car accident, which inspired me to start writing this book as a form of my own rehab. But I seen what people could come back from. And I was pretty bad off. Wasn't feeling real good about life at that point. And people encouraged me, I had been writing since I was young, to start a book. So I started writing novels, and I can honestly say, if it wasn't for writing at that point, I don't know if I would have been able to come out of it as quickly as I did.
Okay, yeah, and you know, and we know that writing is often used as a form of therapy in rehab, along with just the joy of writing for some folks, and so it's used for various reasons. It's very interesting to me that from a car accident that was near fatal for you, that you just launched into your first novel, and you know, after reading it, very interesting indeed. Is there a writer of horror fiction that you kind of looked to or studied more than another writer, like Dean Koontz or Stephen King, for instance, or you know, some of the other top 10 guys that are out there in the world? Anybody out there that kind of just hit you?
Honestly, I'm a big Stephen King fan, Koontz fan, Straub. But the one book that I read that I always said, if I was going to write a book and get it out there to the public, that inspired me, it was Bram Stoker's Dracula. Bram Stoker said in about 300 pages what modern authors, it takes 1,000 pages. And you know, in today's society, with all the monsters and creatures turning into sex objects and beautiful women and guys without shirts, I just really wanted to get back to a good old scary monster book, so that's what I did.
Yeah.
But Bram Stoker is definitely my inspiration.
Fun. What a great inspiration for the work that you do. So let's talk a little bit about your novel, Fritz. Okay. And I'm going to let you tell sort of the story without, of course, the ending, and kind of walk us through some of the cool characters, the captain, the priest, the psycho. Every great story has to have the psycho. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the idea of the book actually came out from one small part, and I was started writing and I thought, how scary would it be if a hand came out of the water? And from that, Fritz was born, believe it or not. The characters are based on people I've known, of course not exactly, but I stole little pieces of people that I've known in my life to come up with the characters. There's a little bit of me and Frankie, and there's a little bit of me and Philip, but there's a whole lot of my family and relatives throughout the book.
Do they know?
No.
Are you going to let them know?
No.
Right.
I'll let them know the good points of the characters. No, the story is based around a small town. That's where I was living at the time of the car accident. And small towns are just their own little universe. And I wanted to kind of to show that in the book. Very close, everybody knows everybody, but they really don't sometimes. You know, you see them all the time, you wave, but you don't really know what's going on behind the doors. This book is about a murder that takes place in a small town cemetery. Kip Gilmore, who is the captain of the local police force, is set to investigate. He recruits a friend from childhood named Philip Parker, who also happens to be a professor teaching ancient cultures at the local university. Together, they dig deep into Parksville's history, and with the aid of a priest, they try to solve this this mystery. There's a lot of body counts that build up. And,
that don't decay.
Yes. That's actually one of my favorite characters. You're referencing Scotty Cooper.
Right.
The funny thing is the heat I get for the people who don't make it through the entire book. I hear a lot of people comment, why did this person have to go? And you can't, it's a horror novel, somebody's got to die.
Somebody has to die.
Yes. So.
That is great. That is great. So as you get to the end of the book, and the suspense is real, and you're in the midst of writing that, what are you feeling like as an author when you're, I mean, because this is your first novel.
Right.
What are you feeling like, not having done, 15 novels before this and old school at it? What are your feelings? Are you anxious? Are you in the middle of that kind of intensity while you're writing it?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And, you're writing, but you're also going back and rewriting. Because as you move forward, you always have to look back to make sure that you're going in the same direction. Towards the end of the novel, I didn't want an ending that was a letdown. I wanted something that was as dramatic as the entire book. And I thought and thought and thought. And for those who have read the book, there was only one way to end that, because I had referenced it so much throughout the book. And the figure I came up with, I thought, was appropriate.
And we can't share.
No.
We can't share the ending.
No. I do want to say in the book, I did hide a diamond in the rough. One of my early writings, something I was always very proud of. But I gave it away to Frankie and his homework assignment.
Oh, how fun.
And that's called The Rose, which is in here, just to show people that I can be a serious author. And that, to me, was an ultimate a win-win for me, because I got my book wrote, and I got to share the rose with people, so that they could see two different sides of me as an author.
What a clever way to do that. Finishing your first novel when clearly this was a dream. It had to have been a dream, just from some of the things that you mentioned with your car accident and writing when you were a kid. You know, so many times authors and writers tell me, poets tell me, this is something that has always been a part of who they were.
Oh, yes.
And then to accomplish the first one, how did that feel personally, just to get the first novel finished, hard copies in your hand? Did you celebrate like mad?
Not yet, but the party's coming.
Okay.
I can tell you that. You know, this is a horror novel, but it's really a book of love for me. The support I've had, and you can see the dedication was to my wife, who actually, I had given up on this book. I had an agent early on, and really never heard anything back. And my wife is the one who said, no, we're going to go get this published. And but just the support from family and friends, and just amazing, just amazing. And I felt wonderful when I finally, for one thing, you're glad to stop writing. And through the editing process, you never want to read it again, but it's a great sense of accomplishment for me.
Absolutely, and there are several processes that one has to go through to get that book from concept to written, through editing, and again editing, and one more time editing, and then
Yes.
finally you get it to the publisher to print it, and if you're self-publishing or however that's going to happen, it is a huge process and sometimes very lengthy.
Yes.
Did it
Yes.
take you a while from final draft to, you know, what was that time frame like for you, from final draft to actually getting a hard copy in your hand?
About a year. About a year.
You know, I asked that question intentionally for our viewers who want to write a novel, who maybe just want to write their first, you know, short story, to know that it is a timely process.
Yes.
This is something that takes a little minute, and but that if you work hard, you end with a completed product that's really, really good. And you know, after reading it, and I'm not a horror person at all. In fact, I'm quite the opposite. I'm love story, you know, poet. That's kind of where I land. This was very cool. The building of the characters in your book is really well done. What did you do to build the captain's character?
Captain Gilmore, I've just known a lot of people, you know that macho facade doesn't necessarily mean that you're as tough as you think you are. And with Kip, it's just the opposite. He doesn't appear to be tough, but like it says in the book, but he was as tough as he needed to be when he needed to be. And I fell in love with the idea of Kip early on. I don't want to give away too much,
Right.
but I wanted you to focus on Kip and Philip for obvious reasons if you read the book. But he was a kid from the wrong side of the tracks who went to community college, fought his way through, and wound up being captain of the police force. And he earned the respect of all of his people. And I just thought that was such a great approach. You know, I came from that trailer park that he was talking about in the book. My mother was a single woman, raising 5 kids in a trailer. So when I talk about that part of the book, that was my childhood.
Gotcha.
And, you know, I had to make sure Kip made something out of his life. So,
Well, he certainly did.
yes.
He certainly did. That is awesome. When you began writing as a child, just for fun, was there ever something in you that you went, yeah, horror is going to be what I do?
Not really. I mean, not when I started writing when I was very young. Salem's Lot really got me on that kick. But I was writing fantasy and all kinds of stuff, you know, more kid stuff, you know. But once I read that book, it was like, okay, this is really cool. I wrote a lot of shorter poems, like the one that's in here, a lot of things like that. And then when it came time to write after my car accident, it's like there's only one genre I really want to write about, and that would be horror. To me, reading horror is a release. When you read it, you get scared, you feel emotion, and you know that's what writing's all about. Is if you can show emotion to the reader and get them involved and engrossed in a book, what greater thing is there? So.
Yeah, definitely. You know, it takes a much different thought process to write horror as opposed to fantasy, as opposed to science fiction.
Yes.
Do you see yourself ever writing, in your next books, something that's different than horror? Do you have a desire to write science fiction or fantasy or something a little more on, a love story edge?
Love story, no.
I had to throw that in there.
Yeah, sci-fi and definitely fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I mean, this type of horror novel goes back to an old-style monster-type story. And a lot of the fantasy you read and see in movies depict the same kind of ancient, scary monsters, and I could transition very easy to fantasy mm-hmm. and sci-fi because Aliens was a great movie and I loved it. Something along that lines for sci-fi.
And it was crazy scary. So
yes.
It definitely was scary. I think a lot of times, a lot of the questions that I have from students and viewers of our show who have not written, who have a desire to write, is, where do I start? How do I even begin to write a book? What would your answer be to a question like that from an aspiring author, writer?
When you start writing, just get your thoughts down and start writing. Like I said, Fritz started with no more than an idea of a hand coming out of the water because I thought that was terrifying. Get your thoughts down. You can always outline later. You can always put it in some kind of format. But the thing is start and then don't stop. Don't walk away from it. That's so easy to do. I've done that myself on many projects. You've got to stick with it and mm-hmm. just keep going. And after a while, you get so engrossed in what you're doing, that story writes itself almost. You go places where you never thought you were going to go, but you get a self-fulfillment out of telling a tale, of creating a world of your own, and putting people in there that you like, and putting people in there that you can't stand.
Right.
So my advice is just keep writing. Just go with your thoughts, put them down on paper, and then work magic with them. Let your imagination go wild. Because I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of things that went in this book that came out of this book that I wrote and go, what is this? And that's okay. I mean, you've got it down. Just keep going. Just keep going. Don't give up the dream.
When we write and we let ourselves go into that fantasy place or into that much different world, and you're kind of captured in that world, how do you get out of that and function? That's two different hats because if I'm not mistaken, you're working while you're writing your book. How easy is that to do?
9/10 of the writing that a writer does, I don't know about everybody, but for me, most of my writing is not done in front of the computer. My writing's done on my way into work, because I'm thinking, if I do this, then I can't get away with saying this later in the book. Or working out, I'll have a thought and go, oh, I got to rewrite all these pages now. Mm-hmm. Damn, Mm-hmm. But yeah, so much of it's, but when you get to work, you're at work.
Right.
And when you're busy, I love being busy. I would much rather be busy. But then on the way home, I'm writing my book again. But that's just part of life. I mean, you've got to shut it off. And most of the time, you're ready to shut it off. You'll go back to that world soon enough. So,
in fictional writing, there's a great deal of research that has to go into writing. It doesn't really matter what you're writing, and I think too often we go, it's fiction. There's a lot of research that goes into writing even fiction. Can you tell me a little bit about the research that you had to do to complete your book?
Well, most of it had to do with, of course, Philip is a professor. So his first assignment is to have the kids write down everything they know about the Inquisition, which meant I had to go back and read up on the Inquisition. I had to, I don't want to give away too much of the book, but I had to research, how do I say this? I had to go back and research mythology, what the different myths were about different things. Also, I had to make sure that I was on track with dates. This is a time period piece in the 80s. You'll hear expressions from the 80s in this book. I didn't want to turn it into a more 80s book where that was the focus instead of the horror story. But you had to use the terms. I even had to look up what kind of jeans were popular back in the 80s because I couldn't remember.
Right.
I was only 10. No,
let's go with 10.
I had to go back and revisit the 80s during most of it. So the new book I'm working on takes place in Dublin. Now, I've never been to Dublin. Thank God for Google Earth, because I've had to walk streets of Dublin in order to write this book.
How very exciting that at this time in a writer's life, we have things like Google Earth.
Oh, yes, amazing.
You know,
amazing.
just how different your writing can be because of the ability to research.
Yes.
You know, I absolutely love to send students out into the world of research, and they hit Google and are you certain that that's real? How do you know that that's real?
Yes.
But it is so important to being able to be where you are not.
Right.
And be accurate. So you just mentioned that you're working on some other works. I know that all writers have several projects going on.
Yes.
Will there be a next book in the series of Fritz?
Well, I kind of gave that away, but you had to read Fritz to figure that out. Yes, there is a sequel.
Great, wonderful. So you know, Stephen King said that we make up horror so that we can actually deal with what's real.
Yes.
How much do you agree with that?
I agree with it wholeheartedly, and I'll tell you why. Because the monsters in this book, you know, are make-believe. You know it's fantasy. The real monsters that are out there look just like we do. They don't have fangs or claws, but there's a real danger out there. And I would prefer this kind of horror to watching some of the horrors on TV and what's really going on in the world. I mean, you can't turn a blind eye to it, but this is a nice break away from it. So, yes, I agree with him. There is horror out there, but unfortunately, it's people that look just like everybody else.
So Rodney, if people would like to talk to you personally about horror writing, or maybe have you come and speak to their group, how would they get in touch with you?
I have a Facebook page. It's called Author Rodney Wetzel. Or they can contact me at rod@53@outlook.com.
Great, that is wonderful. Again, thank you so much for coming out and visiting with us today on The Writer's Den, and we look forward to seeing your next book.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at The Writer's Den. We will see you next time.